morning and welcome to Rising Fridays. I'm Amber Duke and I'm joined by Jessica Burbank to bring you today's show. Good morning, Jessica.
It's good to be with you, Amber. An exciting time for news. What's going on with our buddy Jeffrey Epstein?
Great question. Megyn Kelly actually delivered a cryptic message after the first batch of Epstein documents were unsealed. Let's take a look.
Fascinating, and we're not done with Jeffrey Epstein. I can tell you that for a fact. Can't tell you how I know, but I can tell you for a fact we're going to hear a lot more about Jeffrey Epstein in the coming year, and you may be even hearing from him directly. More on that as I'm allowed to tell you.
Also, Tucker Carlson hosted Epstein's brother, Mark Epstein, on his show where he revealed inconsistencies in the government's explanation for how his brother died.
High-profile inmate in the most secure federal facility in the country's largest city who was somehow murdered, clearly with the knowledge of the Justice Department, and the Attorney General of the United States lies about it, which he did, and there's no reason to do that except to cover up the crime. So
Correct.
What does that tell us about this?
Oh, it's a scary thought that you could be killed in prison by the government.
That your brother was dead in his cell and had been dead for 2 hours.
At least 2 hours.
At least 2 hours.
Yeah.
Somebody cut off his clothing and redressed the corpse in hospital scrubs, in a gown.
Yeah, I have a photograph of him in a hospital gown on a gurney in a hospital where, his arms were put through the sleeves. It's one of those gowns you tie in the back. So the question becomes, who decided to dress a dead body in a hospital gown? Normally they're either in a body bag or covered in it by a sheet.
That's bizarre.
Yes.
And 4.5 years later, you have no answers at all on any of these questions.
None. The autopsy photographs show that the ligature mark on Jeff's neck is in the middle of his neck and goes straight back, as if someone put a rope around his neck and strangled him, like Carlo in The Godfather.
Mark Epstein also told the New York Post that back before his death in 2015, his brother Jeffrey confided in him that if he shared, quote, what he knew about both candidates, the election would be canceled.
Meanwhile, there's renewed scrutiny of the 2007 sweetheart deal that saw Epstein receive just 15 months in prison for child sex abuse. Alexander Acosta, the lead prosecutor on the case, was later questioned on the deal while interviewing for Secretary of Labor under the Trump administration. He reportedly told interviews, quote, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. Acosta would later serve as labor secretary under Trump, only to quietly resign later over his handling of the Epstein case, which he has still never been publicly questioned on to this day. So a lot's going on here. I think one of the most fascinating parts of the documents we did have released, so 40 of 250 exhibits, it's about 1,000 pages that we have now, is we know that it was the case that Virginia G's attorney had tried to push back on this defense that Ghislaine Maxwell's team came up with, which is if Virginia is saying that when she was at Epstein Island, Bill Clinton was also there, she's lying, that's insane, Bill Clinton was never there. And so the response of the prosecution was, okay, if you're saying that my client is not credible and is lying, saying that she saw Bill Clinton on the island, why don't we depose Bill Clinton? Let's ask him ourselves, the one person that would have to tell the truth under oath. So we settle this. And the judge, ultimately U.S. District Judge Robert Sweet, said it was irrelevant. And then Bill Clinton was never deposed, despite this being a large part of Ghislaine Maxwell's team's defense. So ultimately the case was settled. It never went to trial. That's very suspicious considering the request by Virginia G's attorney happened just a few days after Hillary Clinton clinched the Democratic nomination. And then, months of back and forth, and ultimately, the case is settled, which I think is a fancy legal way of sometimes saying they paid her to shut up, to stop talking about it. So there's really a lot here. We've seen photographs of Bill Clinton, Elon Musk, Prince Andrew, we obviously know is a huge part of this, Donald Trump, all of these, very prominent public figures with Jeffrey Epstein. And we don't have Jeffrey Epstein here to depose, but we do have a lot of documents, and we'll see what else comes out. Amber, what's your initial reaction to all of this?
Yeah, I found myself sort of gravitating towards the same information you did, especially there was an email from Virginia G that suggested Bill Clinton, well, not suggested, it straight up said, but allegedly Bill Clinton went into the offices of Vanity Fair and threatened them not to write an article about his friend Jeffrey Epstein. He, of course, is all over the flight logs. We've known that for a while now, and was also spotted in that eyewitness account from Virginia, apparently on Epstein Island. There's also more details coming out about Prince Andrew and even Stephen Hawking, that they allegedly participated in these underage orgies and sexual assaults that took place repeatedly in the Jeffrey Epstein orbit. I think what's interesting about Trump's inclusion in the documents is how little it actually says. He was not spotted on Epstein Island. She never saw him on the plane, basically said that she didn't believe that he had any knowledge of what was going on. The only time that Jeffrey Epstein himself ever brought up Trump was he allegedly wanted to invite him to go gambling with him in Atlantic City. And then we know that him and Trump had a falling out at some point. Trump claims that he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago because he was hitting on underage girls. Or I think specifically it might have been the daughter of one of the members of the club. And so then they ended up not being friends after that. But Megyn Kelly's, I guess, preview of what's to come is something to watch too. If you listen to the wider context of that clip, it seems like she's talking about perhaps the tapes that Jeffrey Epstein made of himself, talking about some of the blackmail and other relationships that he had with high-profile people. And so I hope that that comes out. It seems like these were a little bit unsatisfying, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the rest of the documents say as well, as they're unsealed by the court, because outside of the Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, and Stephen Hawking revelations, there hasn't really been that much, I think, that helps illuminate exactly how Jeffrey Epstein got wealthy, exactly how he was able to maintain these relationships with all of these high-profile people, and exactly who all was involved in the actual trafficking of these young girls.
Right. We know that, this case that was settled in 2017 where Virginia G, who was a 17-year-old at the time, was allegedly trafficked by Ghislaine Maxwell. That's what this case was about. And then, of course, was photographed with Prince Andrew directly. And then she had testimony that he had done some very criminal things to her. And of course, an undisclosed sum of money was paid by Prince Andrew to Virginia G. Again, this kind of situation where it's legal to pay someone to stop talking about something. Prince Andrew lost his military duties, his public duties with the royal family. They tried everything they possibly could to keep this quiet. The royal family did. And these documents being unsealed, thanks to Judge Loretta Preska, who said there was no legal reason they were sealed in the first place. Now we're getting a lot of information that these very rich and very powerful people tried to pay to have go away. And so the Prince Andrew stuff, we knew a lot of it, but there was a lot of information that didn't get out that probably could have about the royal family and other people Virginia G saw there, just because she was paid to not talk about it. So it just feels like justice that this information is becoming public at all.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good first step, hopefully, in this saga. I think another big question that needs to be answered is how exactly Jeffrey Epstein was able to avoid accountability for so many years, and the extent of the alleged cover-up that took place because of the protection of these high-profile individuals who were involved in it. I know that Alex Acosta, the former labor secretary for Donald Trump, has said that he was basically pushed into giving Jeffrey Epstein a plea deal the first time that he was charged for some of this behavior, and he thinks it was because of his high-profile connections and possibly even his connection with the intelligence organizations in the United States. Some people believe that he was actually an asset for U.S. intelligence, which would also help explain why he was able to keep out of prison for so long. We're going to leave it there. We'll be back with more Rising after this.